Morning guys, on Mathew 14, reading from verse 22 to 33. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. So this is after the feeding of the 5,000. He sends the disciples, gets them in the boat, and then he goes up the mountain. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. Just an important principle before we get into the text is just to find time to be alone with the Lord. There's so many distractions, so many things we get so busy that we often don't find time for the Lord. Specifically, I think of myself with a family, work. It's very difficult to find time, but it's important just to draw along, have a quiet time, spend time alone with the Lord. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, so the disciples on the boat, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So a storm came up, and those storms were terrifying, and we know history tells us that, and they were being battered by the waves. And in the fourth watch, that's in verse 25, that's sort of early hours of the morning, 2-3 o'clock in the morning, fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. So he's obviously come down now after spending some time with his father, this is Jesus, and he walks on the sea, passing them by. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said it is a ghost. So when they saw Jesus, they didn't recognize him, and they thought it was a ghost. It's interesting that they used the word ghost or apparition, or the fact that they thought they knew something of this word in the spirit world, but it's only used here and in Mark regarding the same passage. So if we look in Mark, he also uses that word, it is a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And Jesus cries out, "No, don't be afraid, I'm not a ghost, it's me, I'm just coming to help you." Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And so Peter wants to make sure, is this a ghost? Is this Jesus? Well, if this is Jesus, then he'll make him walk on water. A ghost couldn't do that. And he said, this is Jesus, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." And this is such an important principle right here, is that as soon as we take our eyes off Jesus and we start to fix our eyes on the circumstances, the trials, the problems that surround us, that's when we start to fear, and that's when our faith starts to diminish. So very, very important. We all fall into this trap. We allow the circumstances, we allow the trials of life to govern our mind, our thought patterns, and we start to worry about things, we start to fear. And so the answer is always to bring your mind and your thoughts back to Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus, and don't allow the trials to overcome your mind and your thought patterns. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. So Peter, focusing on the wind, the waves, and the scary situation he is in, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And just the compassion of Jesus. In that trial, yes, we're going to sometimes focus on the wrong things, the circumstances, but we must always cry out, and God is always there, Jesus is always there to stretch out his hand and pick you out of that trial and bring you back and to help you in that situation, just like he did with Peter. And he says, "You of little faith." And that's the problem, is that it's the lack of faith. When we focus on the circumstances and not on Christ, that's when our faith starts to diminish. Verse 32, when they got into the boat, the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are certainly God's Son." And here's just an aspect of the deity of Christ. They recognize Jesus as God. He has authority over even the waves that listen to him. He has authority to multiply the bread. And we know from the other accounts in the other Gospels that they hadn't understood the feeding of the 5,000. And now they're starting to understand. Not only has he authority over the healings that they saw in the land, he has authority over the waves, he has authority over every aspect of creation, and therefore he must be God. And so they worshipped him as God. And so when we look at this passage, there's lots to learn. We know in the other Gospels, there's many other different accounts. It's interesting, in the other Gospels, they don't talk about Peter walking on water, but they focus on other aspects of the miracle. Like in John 6:21, it says, immediately the boat reached the shore. So suddenly there's another miracle. They're all in the boat, and suddenly they're on shore, all of a sudden. The waves calm down, and then the next minute they're miraculously on shore. So there's many miracles that we learn from this account. But the big thing is that we need to have our eyes fixed on Jesus. We need to walk in faith. When we fear, we start to sink. But when we walk in faith, we can do amazing things through Christ who strengthens us. Amen.